Mainstream media tend to portray Singapore as a city-state whose main business is international banking, commerce, high-end manufacturing and education. Some critics describe the small Asian country as a dictatorship, totalitarian and even fascist state. As always, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It is quite questionable, however, if in the post-coronavirus world, offshore tax havens will have the same status or if they will have to go through radical transformation. Thus the future of Singapore is yet to be determined. I'm your host Kasim and thanks for joining me for another KJ Report. In this video we will discuss the geopolitics of Singapore and why Singapore is so important. Just before we start, I would like to make a kind request for all of our followers, subscribers and fans of KJ Reports to support KJ Reports on Patreon. We need your support. We have lots of plans for KJ Reports, but these can only be realised once we have a significant revenue stream in order to fund the high costs involved in producing research and quality reports. It is quite debatable whether Singapore is a democratic society. It is extremely difficult to define democracy in the first place, as that word lost its original meaning a long time ago. If modern democracy is simply the political weapon of money, then Singapore can be listed as a democratic nation. Some authors argue that the Southeast Asian city-state is more like a dictatorship operating under the guise of a functioning democracy. In any case, it is a very functional country of 5.5 million people, about the size of St. Petersburg in Russia. Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of Singapore who served as the country's Prime Minister for 31 years, legitimised the idea that it is possible to have progress without democracy. The exuberance of democracy leads to undisciplined and disorderly conditions which are inimical to development, Lee Kuan Yew once said. Some authors claim that the Chinese leadership favours Singaporean-style governance as a feasible model for the future. The so-called Singapore model is a direct product of Lee's personality, as well as the decision of the global finance capital to house one of its headquarters in this tiny piece of land. Since Singapore has very few natural resources, major world powers do not have any interests to compete over the control of the Singaporean territory. The very foundation of the city-state in 1965 is likely a product of a deal between various global oligarchic groups. Singapore's most important raison d'etre is to serve as a financial centre in Southeast Asia and to maintain the global finance system in this part of the world. Some researchers call Singapore a benevolent dictatorship. It is a system in which an authoritarian leader exercises absolute political power over the state but is perceived to do so with regard for benefit of the population as a whole. Besides the deceased Lee Kuan Yew, this label has been applied to leaders such as Saddam Hussein of Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and Josip Broz Tito of Yugoslavia. However, unlike Saddam and Gaddafi, Lee Kuan Yew was never overthrown by the West, and unlike in the case of former Yugoslavia, the Western powers never took part in the breakup of Singapore, which could mean that major global actors have certain benefits from the existence for the entity of Singapore. It is worth noting that in 2019, the city-state was ranked the fourth most competitive financial centre in the world. According to Murray Hunter, an associate professor at the University Malaysia Perlis, Singapore is run in a manner to which a British colonial administrator would have aspired. He argues that the strong control of Lee Kuan Yew was the dominant driver of society. Lee Kuan Yew opened the country to foreign trade and investment but held a chokehold on politics, keeping the media tamed and the tiny opposition cowed. When Singapore attained self-government in 1959, only 9% of Singaporeans resided in public housing. Today, 80% of the population reportedly lives in a government-built apartment. Also, today 90% of land is owned by the state as opposed to 49% in 1965. Finally, 4 in 10 people in Singapore are migrants, which is also the case in many oil-rich Middle East countries. Migration is expected to continue as the local Singapore population is rapidly ageing. According to the doctrine of Singapore's ruling party, the People's Action Party, A good government is one with the ability to convince its citizens to compromise individual liberties for long-term collective interests. In Singapore, an authoritarian government is seen as necessary to protect the country from being bullied in the neighbourhood. Singapore is striving to maintain a strategic balance amongst the United States and China as relations in the region shift. From the geopolitical perspective, the country has avoided picking sides and maintains good relations with much of the world. As Simon Tay, chairman of the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, points out, in today's world, the UK no longer provides the dominant framework for global order, the US does. Singapore recognised this and started to step up engagements with the US decades ago. In 2019, Singaporean authorities reportedly said they would renew a memorandum of understanding that gives Washington access to Singapore's air and naval bases. The city-state has also ordered several F-35 combat jets manufactured by US group Lockheed Martin to replace its aging F-16s. It is also worth mentioning that from 1966, the Israeli military advisors were brought in to train the Singaporean military. Israel also supplied Singapore with military hardware including tanks and missiles. According to the Financial Times, both China and the US are critical commercial partners for the city-state. China is Singapore's largest trading partner, as well as the top recipient of the city-state's outward direct investment, whilst the US is the biggest source of foreign direct investment for the island nation. While Singapore shares many economic and cultural ties with China, it has also emerged as a viable alternative for investors who would like to capitalise on China's rapid economic growth but do not want to be invested directly in China's capital markets, wrote scholar Wu Junji. Simon Tay, on the other hand, emphasises that Singapore's interests are not to permanently ally with one major power over another. Beyond these two great powers, it is increasingly important to work with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and others further away like Japan, France and Germany, and other like-minded partners in Europe and Canada, and all those who support a rules-based and inclusive order in Asia and across the world, wrote Tay. Singapore is very westernised. English is the main language, and even though Chinese make the majority of population, the government is not embarrassing Chinese culture. Author Audrey J.J. Lee claims that an effective legal system is crucial to the success of Singapore's governance approach and a key reason Singapore stays nearly corruption-free. However, Singapore's position as one of the world's leading financial centres make it particularly vulnerable to money laundering due to large cross-border flows. Some critics argue that the late Lee Kuan Yew has managed to intimidate and subjugate through bribes, monetary favours and high salaries the top echelons of the power, namely the judiciary and top civil servants, to obey him and fulfill all of his demands. Goplan Nair, a US-based blogger who claims to be a Singaporean dissident, wrote that the true Singapore is the decadent, corrupt one-party state where the government seeks to exercise strict control over all aspects of public discourse. According to Nair, Singapore is a system where the family of the deceased Lee Kuan Yew, as well as a small circle of chosen people, run the show. Given that modern Singapore was founded in 1819 when Stamford Raffles, a British colonial officer, established a trading post of the East Indian Company on the main island, it is no surprise that to this day the tiny nation serves as a major financial outpost for the global elite. It remains to be seen for how long the city-state will manage to preserve such a status. That's all for today guys, thanks for watching another KJ Report. I hope you enjoyed this video and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't forget to become a member of our Patreon page, which will significantly help KJ Reports survive and expand. Thanks for watching again and see you next time.